that altered state where we're like, ooh, and so spacey that we've dissociated from everything in life, and now we're only experiencing the energetic realms. I believe about bringing that energy down here, bringing the energy into the body and going right into it. Like, okay, you are looking for answers on a decision that you want to make in life. Let's just get it right now. Let's go into it. And, once we have really brought that level of awareness to our own energy, because that's what I teach first, is really becoming aware of your own energy. And once you have that level of awareness of your own energy, it's like you can almost get answers before you even have the question.
Okay, I think what I want to ask you about is something that keeps coming up for me, and I mean, this is constantly on my mind, and that's dreams. But most recently, premonition dreams.
Mhm.
So I know on your TikTok channel you talk a lot about psychic powers and different, I would say, different abilities that people have, and you also mentioned that we all have the ability to that we all have psychic abilities in general. So my question is, when it comes to dreams, how would you define a dream? And also, how would you define a dream that, let's say, is repeating and is showing someone the future, seemingly the future?
Yeah, sure. So it's really important to me, like the way that we speak and articulate. I like to be clear on different definitions, because how we define things really is important about how the message comes across. And so,
Right.
just to kind of clarify what you were saying, as far as everybody has psychic powers, everybody has these abilities. Yes, I believe that as well. And traditional New Age spirituality talks about mediumship, talks about intuition, talks about psychic, talks about healing, talks about all of these different modalities, as they're these separate things. And the way that I look at them and the way that I experience them as well is that these are just our abilities. These are our innate abilities. We are spirit, we are energy, and we all have the same abilities to do these things. And so, all of these new age modalities flow through our seven, I call them our psychic senses, okay, or spiritual abilities. I kind of go back and forth between the two. And so when we're experiencing mediumship or spirit communication, we're communicating with the spirit through our senses. And so that's the way that I like to kind of like really talk about things, is through the senses, and not any kind of like one specific modality or anything. And going back to what you're saying, yes, everybody does have these things. And I like to talk about them in that very direct way, because when some people start to say, well, I'm a medium, or I'm a psychic, or that person's a medium, that person's a psychic, what we start to insinuate, or what we start to believe, is that, oh, some people have this and others don't. And that's my message, is that we all can do this. Okay. So you'll hear me say psychic abilities and spiritual abilities. I think they're all one and the same. So, but to answer your question about dreams, I believe there's a couple different types of dreams. Okay. And this is what I've experienced. And so, starting at the bottom, we have these dreams that are just our subconscious projections, just our subconscious discharging energy throughout the stuff that we've picked up. And there can be some meaning to that, but for the most part, it's just us discharging. For example, let's say we fell asleep with some kind of like action movie on, right? And we start dreaming all of these action scenes and all of this stuff. That's our subconscious just kind of discharging the day, or discharging the material. Then there's then there's dreams where it's actually our subconscious that's communicating through our dreams. Okay. And so that's where a lot of personal insight can come through. Okay. And not necessarily dreams that see the future, but dreams that are like, for example, let's say, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying that she had this dream to start her therapy practice. And in her dream, she got the name of the therapy practice, and she began it and she started it. And that's the name of her therapy practice. And it's been very successful. And so that was her subconscious communicating to her in a way, you are prepared. Go out and start this business. You are ready to, see people and work with them. And so, that's kind of, what I mean by our subconscious communicating with our conscious mind. Now, it can also communicate in dark ways, right? Where we see, or not in dark ways, but like red flags, right? We start to see people in a way that we may not be seeing them show up in life, right? And so it's really important to pay attention to those types of dreams because our subconscious is giving us clues as to what's happening beneath the surface in our own psyche. Um, then there's the a lot of people talk about visitation dreams where our loved ones, our past loved ones or other spirits or whatever, angels and whatnot, will visit us in our dreams. Now, I believe, and what I experienced through this is that it's not really a dream that's happening when we have these visitation dreams. What's going on is, whenever we whenever we fall asleep, right, we start to relax the conscious mind and we will get into this receptive state. And so even if you believe you don't have any spiritual abilities, well, when you start to settle down, that part of you kind of turns on. When the conscious mind turns off, that part of you turns on. Okay, naturally. Okay, you can do it as well consciously. You can turn that part of yourself on, the spiritual abilities on consciously, but it also happens on an unconscious level as we're falling asleep and as we're waking up. Happens twice a day. And so when that happens, sometimes the body will be asleep, but our mind will still kind of be on, but in a very subtle level. And when we have these visitation dreams, what's going on is we've left our body and we're actually visiting. We are the ones visiting with our loved ones in the spirit world. Okay. And the way that you can tell when you have one of those dreams is um, it feels real. It just feels so real. It's not like, oh, I dreamt about so and so. It's like, no, they were right there. I hugged them. I embraced them. It was a very emotion. There's a lot of emotional charge. You wake up in disbelief. Sometimes there's some sadness there because you actually forgot that they had passed. That type of intensity will let you know that that was a visitation dream. That you've gone left your body and you went and visited in the spirit world. Um, Now, to answer the question that you brought up, the premonition dreams, these are just dreams that our intuition is communicating to us. That premonitions, that's just intuitions that could be considered as psychic as well. And reading into energy, right? When we leave out the labels, let's leave out intuition. It's you reading into the energy of the future, okay?
Mm.
And that's really what's happening. And again, when we start to settle down, when we start to fall asleep, we can easily read into that energy. And so when we start to get these premonitions, that's what's happening. We're reading into some future energy. Yeah.
I love that. You said so much that's like really resonating with me right now. I literally took notes. So going back to the seven senses, I'm so happy that you said that because I do have a habit of getting caught up in the new age spirituality where I'm kind of dividing everything and forgetting that we all have these senses. We just don't focus on them, because we're focused on what we see, what we hear, what we smell. So, going back to the seven senses, what is something that someone can do to enhance them so that they can be a little bit more in touch with their higher self, maybe more in touch with the astral realm?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the new age spiritual community. And I really want to be clear on that because I do talk out against it a lot. And the only reason I do that is because if you're staying stuck there and not moving, it is entry level, right? It is a gateway. It is where a lot of people find comfort after a spiritual awakening because a lot of them can be very traumatic. As a matter of fact, all of them are pretty much traumatic. And so when we have that awakening, that community is there and it's accepting, and it's a way for us to really make sense of what we're experiencing. And so although I speak out on it a lot, I want to be clear that there's absolutely nothing wrong with going into that as long as you're using it for a stepping stone and don't stay stuck. Okay. Because I'm a
Right.
big believer in, listen, go try everything. Go try everything, whatever resonates, experiment and play with that. Okay. So you can validate it. Right. And that's my premise. If you're not doing that, if we're just like, oh, crystals and I need these crystals or I can't do it, I mean, that's where we start to get stuck. Um, yeah. So as far as like developing and coming into these spiritual abilities, first let me talk about the seven ones, right? So the seven spiritual abilities or psychic senses that we all have is seeing, but not a physical seeing, seeing with our mind's eye, hearing, but not hearing with our ears, hearing in the way that we hear a thought, but it's not a thought that we're thinking, it's a thought that we receive. And then there's knowing, which is like a gut feeling. It's exactly what it is, a gut feeling. And then there's feeling, like touch feeling, but it's not like something reaching out and grabbing you. It's an energetic touch, right? You're feeling the intention of whatever. Let's say grandma touches your shoulder and you can feel grandma's hand on your shoulder. She's not actually grabbing your shoulder. You're feeling her intention of placing her hand on your shoulder, and it's an energetic stimulus that you're receiving. It's not a physical stimulus. Grandma couldn't like move your shoulder back and forth, right? But it can make you feel that way because it's an energetic stimulus that you're picking up through grandma's intention. And then there's empathy, right? A lot of the New Age spiritual community calls this being an empath. Well, we're all empaths. Everyone is. It's just one of our senses, and we all have the ability to feel and sense the emotions of others. And that's what empathy is. Okay, and then there's smelling and there's taste. Okay, and we can smell the same way. We can smell, like an example, what I talk about in what I talk about sometimes in social media is like you see the pizza or the cookies on TV and you can smell them, right? They're not really there, but you smell them or you can taste them. That's what our psychic sense is, of smell and taste. And so I think I covered all seven: seeing, hearing, feeling, knowing, empathy, smell, taste. Yeah. Okay. So those are the seven ones. So the way that you can turn them on, for lack of a better term, is just by going with which one is dominant for you. All right. Everybody has a dominant sense. And it's important for us to identify that, right? If somebody identifies as an empath, what that really tells me is your dominant sense is feeling. You can feel the emotions of others. Your dominant sense is empathy, right? And so you're able to feel the emotions of others. So when you're communicating with your loved ones or your spirit guides, if you're just starting out doing this, you have no business trying to see them, trying to hear them, trying to sense them in any other way but feeling their emotions. You can have a complete conversation and get so many important messages just by feeling the emotions of your loved ones and spirit guides. And I think that's where a lot of people experience the disconnect. If they're not standing there in front of them, if they're not communicating in a way they can hear them with their physical ears, that they discount everything else or don't think that anything's happening. But that's the key to really, for lack of a better term, open up our other senses, right? Because here's the thing: our senses are there. They're always there. They're always on. We couldn't turn them on and off if we wanted to, but we can dissociate from them. And that's what we've done. Yeah. So our spiritual abilities are always on. And we can't turn them on or off, but we can dissociate from them. And that's what we've done. We've essentially forgot about them because of societal conditioning, how we were raised, because of familial conditioning, because of religious conditioning, and some, right? We are raised to believe that this is just our imagination, that this isn't really true. And so when we talk about developing or coming into our spiritual abilities, we're really using the real terminology. It's about remembering them, right? It's about remembering our own spiritual abilities, and more, to be more specific, it's about bringing an awareness to them, because they're always on. They're fully strengthened. You don't have to do anything. There's no practices that are going to make them stronger. What we have to do is just bring more of that awareness to them. And the way that we really accomplish that is, like I was saying earlier, with our dominant sense. When we start to actually do this stuff, right? If you want to communicate with a loved one, if you want to communicate with the spirit world, just go start doing it. right? Just start doing, like, what does it look like? What steps do I take? You don't even need any steps. Just do what comes natural. Do what feels intuitively comes through for you. Do what feels right. And when you feel like you're making it up, still keep doing it, right? And when you keep doing it that way, you're going to identify what that dominant sense is. You're going to start to experience things. You're going to start to really feel things. It's going to happen eventually it will happen in a way that's undeniable for you, a way that you know beyond any shadow of a doubt that you connected with the spirit world. And that's really all it takes is you do that. You'll find your dominant sense. Keep doing it. Keep leading with your dominant sense once you've found it. And then that dominant sense will help you become aware of how everything else is working. Because let's say, like, let's go back to the empath example, right? Let's say your dominant sense is feeling. You figure that out. You start feeling into the emotions of who you're communicating with in the spirit world. And then all of a sudden, that feeling brings a sound. And then now that sound is starting to bring an image, right? And now that image is starting to bring some other sensation, right? And so because we led with that dominant sense, it brought on all of that other information. And so to kind of just sum it all up is, if you want to start working with your abilities and get them, become fully aware of them, you've just got to start working with them.
Absolutely. I love that. So speaking of dominant sense, what's yours and how did you tell me about like the moment you realized that it was your dominant sense?
So when I say dominant sense, I'm talking about more of somebody coming into this for the first time, for them really trying. Because
Right.
what we have, like, so now once you get used to it, once you are here and you're doing it, you're working with your dominant sense, what happens is everything else, you bring such an awareness to it. Now you don't have a dominant sense because everything is there. You have such an awareness on it. But for me, when I first came into it, it was visually. I was seeing these beings, right, in my mind's eye. Yeah,
Okay.
in my mind's eye. Like, yeah, we don't see what we can see with our physical eyes, right? That's a physical apparition, right? But
Right.
here's the thing: everybody in the room will see that thing being, right? It's not
Mhm.
just nobody has special eyes where they can say, "Oh, do you see that spirit there? I see them with my eyes," and you can't see them too. It's just not factual. It's probably not occurring. Now, I do believe there are some people out there that see so strong with their mind's eye, they may believe that there is a physical manifestation, but that's not what's happening, right? So yeah, so when I first started happening, I was seeing visually, right, in my mind's eye, and it was like, well, really, it was feeling, right. I would feel the energy, and then all of a sudden, there would be this vision I would get. Okay, because I feel like that my dominant at that time was both feeling and visual, and you'll notice that too. A lot of people will notice that. They'll be like, "Well, I have more than one dominant." That's totally normal, of course, and I think that that's what it was for me, was this feeling visual type thing, and that's really how seeing the spirit world, or seeing energy, or seeing anything that's not visible with your physical eyes, is about allowing the energy of what you're perceiving or what you want to perceive, allow that energy to paint the image in your mind's eye.
Hmm. I love that. That's the truth. I mean, I think when I first started learning more about psychic abilities in general, I used to think that clairvoyance, which is seeing in the mind's eye, was my dominant. And then eventually I started realizing that it was more of a clairsentient, which I believe means all knowing. Not all
Mhm.
knowing, I mean, like just
Gut
feeling
feeling,
that
that gut feeling. Yeah.
exactly the gut feeling. Um, it's so interesting because I feel like a lot of us are really we really tapped into it, but we just don't realize it, you know. And I don't think it's necessary for everyone to really do a major deep dive and become mediums and start working with people. But I do think that this is something that, in my opinion, should be like the default. Our senses, learning about our seven senses, you know. Um, but yeah, so I want to go back into dreams. And when you mentioned that visitation dreams are basically us traveling to that realm and seeing our loved ones, what came up for me was common symbols. And one of the most common dream symbols when it comes to visitations are train stations.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you've heard of that. People seeing train stations and seeing their loved ones in the train or on at the station itself.
No, I haven't really heard about that. No.
Okay, cool. So, um, I noticed it. I know that when I Googled it, a lot of other people were also seeing it. And it just kind of reminds me of the fact that we all are connected. And I wonder if there's a specific like realm that we can go to and like see our loved ones in that particular place. And it might be manifesting, how would I explain it? It might be manifested by just the idea of uh, a common travel place in general. So whether it be a train station or maybe a airport or something, but it seems to be like around travel in general. So I'm just kind of like, I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, so of course, it definitely. I don't think the spirit world has any one particular look. Okay, I think it is pure energy, and if we were really to look into it, what it literally was, it would just look like gas fumes, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I perceive things, when I really try to like look past a lot of stuff, right? Because we can have our loved ones show up for us, and the way that they're projecting their energy, they look like our loved one as we remember them. But if you go past that, what I've seen is just like gas fumes or balls of light. Okay, and I think that that's what the spirit world looks like in general. But with people experiencing common themes, especially when it comes to dreams, you know there are archetypal themes, right? And so if you're meeting up with your loved one in the spirit world, it doesn't really surprise me that we're seeing these things happening in airports and happening in train stations and stuff in places of travel, right? Because subconsciously we think that our loved ones have gone to some physical place and we must go visit them, right? And so when I believe, and this is just theory right now, I haven't actually experienced this, but what I believe is happening is that it's a little mix of subconscious, our subconscious projections and that visitation dream, right? Because we may not, right, the mind is still a little awake, the mind is somewhat awake, it's just in this altered state, right? It's in that theta state or that delta state, that deep sleep state, right? And so we're still going to have some of that coming up in the dream. And so for us, for somebody that's never experienced the spirit world, to them their mind has to create something for it to make sense, of what they're experiencing. And so I believe that that's a possibility of what's happening. And the reason why is because I used to work with people. I used to work with people and do past life regressions, but I was doing them in a very therapeutic way, right? Where we would go into the past life and we would help work with the karma of what was carried forward in this life, right? And so if we had terrible relationships in this life, what we're going to do is we're going to go into that and go see where that originated from, right? The first place that came from. And what I would notice is as we would track through the past life, we would go into the moment of death, then we would kind of go into the spirit world where, we would work with the soul fragment of the person that experienced that life. And in there, a lot of times, let's say, somebody was just kind of emotionally abused their entire life. When they get into the spirit world and we start to do some of the healing work, right, where we have the ancestors come in, where we have, different light beings and energy beings come in and help work with them, or even work with them just in a therapeutic setting, right? It was very clinical, this work. And a lot of times somebody that was experiencing emotional abuse their entire life, they're just like, I don't have the energy to heal. I can't do this, right? And so what do? We call in a figure that represents the energy that they're looking for, right? And so if it's somebody that needs to find energy, that needs to find strength, that's one of the techniques that we literally learned was, okay, I want you to find that courage. I want you to find that energy. I want you to see something that represents that show up for you now. And it was always animals, right? It was always animals. And somebody that needed strength, right? If it was just strength, it was almost always the elephant that showed up. Archetypal energy. If somebody needed courage, it was almost always the tiger showing up, right? And so it was all this archetypal energy that was showing up. And so that's what the reason I say this is because that's what I think is happening when we look at people experiencing something as similar as like the airports and the train stations, as far as a spirit world. I think that's what we're looking is archetypal energies. Yeah.
Hmm. I like that, and that reminds me of a lot of the Carl Jung's teachings, which I've only kind of scratched the surface of.
Yes.
I'm still learning a little bit more about it, but yeah, it's really interesting. And I think whether it be train station or whether it be an animal, when it comes to past life regression, that whole realm is just, it's such like a, I don't know how to explain it. It's like a rabbit hole to me. And I've done like 5 past life regressions, by the way. My very first one was to focus on my eating habits, and I ended up, what was I? Let's see. I started off at a castle, which is really interesting because, as you can see, my background here, like I'm really into the medieval Renaissance art, and I have these visions sometimes of being an aristocrat,
Mm.
in a big castle and having this control over the people around me and things like that. So when I did my first past life regression, I saw this gorgeous like blonde who was standing next to a pond, and she was next to a castle, and she had this very like, she was smirking, and she had this very like kind of pompous attitude, and she was just tossing rocks in the pond like, I'm bored today. And I moved past that into a garden, and then went into this past life regression scene where I was in a famine in Ireland,
Mm.
the Great Potato Famine, and it's what I figured out. But that kind of connected to me overeating in this life to at one point having dealt with a famine in a past life.
You know,
It's
Tanisha,
Go ahead.
if I could, you mentioned something earlier that that I kind of want to go back on, is like, and just maybe briefly, maybe this will open up something else, but
Yeah.
where you said you were talking about this gut feeling, how that was like your dominant sense, and how you felt like that the gut feeling was coming through for you, or the clairsentience, or the knowing, right? That's what I tend to call it, is a knowing. And
Yeah.
that, I've worked with so many people, and that is probably the most common one. And I have a theory behind that, right? You can go to your family members, you can go to work, you can go to school and say, I have this gut feeling that this thing's going to happen today, right? And it's cool, it's acceptable. But if you go into that same setting and be like, I talked to my spirit guides today and he told me to be careful of this, you're batshit crazy. Right? And so it's not conditioned out of us like the way that other things are. Yeah.
That's the truth. Yeah, it really is. I'm definitely like starting to become more in tune with my gut feeling. I have this saying like, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no. And I wait for that feeling. I'll ask a question. And if I feel like, if my gut's restricting, then I know it's a no. And if I feel relief, or if I feel excitement, but even a little bit of fear with the excitement, I know it's a yes for me. So whenever I'm making a decision. So, tell me something that you've learned about yourself while helping others on this journey, because I do want to say you've helped me a lot in your videos, by the way. Like when I started scrolling past, and I ran into your videos, I think I binge watched probably like 20 in a row, because the things that you speak about are very different. You have a different point of view and than what we're used to hearing on TikTok. So tell me how, like, what's something that you've learned about your own practice while you're helping other people?
So, in the context, so what I've learned in helping other people is that I really don't know it all. I really don't know anything, right? I really don't know anything. It is so mind boggling on how much certainty gets put out there around this information. And it just it's the more that I work with people, the more that I realize that I don't know. Because what ends up happening is, when I'm working with somebody, right, I do a lot of one-on-one work too. And when I'm working with somebody in that one-on-one setting, and I'm working to get them to that place they want to be, through empowerment, right? It's not about giving answers, it's not about telling you need to do this, it's not even about a certain amount of steps, right? And this is what I've learned, is there is no rock solid concrete path that everyone can take. There's no step 1 through 10 and you get it. Okay? It doesn't work like that. What I've understood, what I've realized, is that when I'm working with somebody, number one, you have to atone to them energetically, right? You have to be really in tune with the person that you're working with, so you can see the problem behind the problem. Whatever they're presenting in that moment it's not a spiritual block. It's not a chakra that's unbalanced. It's always something practical. It's almost always an insecurity or some bad information that formed a belief that they need to get past. It's really all about those two things. And so when somebody is saying, I can't do this, I can't see them, I feel them, but I'm not seeing them, like, it's really being attuned to the energy to see, to feel what specifically that is for that individual that's holding them back right then and there in that moment, right? You know, I feel like the default in the spiritual community is like, oh, you need to meditate more. You need to meditate on that. Why are you stuck? Just meditate and it'll
I
take
know.
care of
I've
it.
gotten caught in that too. I'm just like, maybe you should just meditate because it's hard. It's like, I want to help you, but I know that your path is so different from mine, and as we all are. And it's like I can't tell you what to do, or else I'm basically diverting you from what you could be doing that might actually help you. So the default ends up being go meditate, and hopefully you'll get the answer you need.
Right. And listen, I believe that meditation has a time and a place. I
Yeah,
believe that the meditation as a tool, number one, will help you reset the nervous system, will help you self-regulate, will help you get into a very peaceful place. And yes, we can use it to tap into our intuition. Yes, we can use it to communicate with the spirit world. But it happens when we're using it as a tool to access our innate abilities. It's passive, right? We're going to see something show up. If it's intuition that comes through, it's just going to come through as like whatever it is. It's like, oh, boom, here's this insight, and that's it. You're done with you can sit there in your meditation the rest of the time, and it's like, oh, here, and it could even be insight after insight, right? But it's not you engaging in actively. And the way that I like to teach people is that, no, we don't have to get into that dissociative state, that altered state where we're like, ooh, and so spacey that we've dissociated from everything in life. And now we're only experiencing the energetic realms. I believe about bringing that energy down here, bringing the energy into the body and going right into it. Like, okay, you are looking for answers on a decision that you want to make in life. Let's just get it right now. Let's go into it. And, once we have really brought that level of awareness to our own energy, because that's what I teach first, is really becoming aware of your own energy. And once you have that level of awareness of your own energy, it's like you can almost get answers before you even have the question. And so the way that I like to work is that I will, if I have a decision that I need to make and I'm looking for, insight, I'm going to go into that decision, just like you said earlier. Okay, there's a crossroad, decision A, decision B, do it or don't do it, right? What does it feel like to go this way? What does it feel like to go that way? Oh, it's better this way. Okay, but I'm emotionally invested in this way. Okay, let's go that way first. And then I'm going to really dive into that, right? Into the energetics of it, into the feelings of that, right? And I'm going to really let myself go there, right? And I'm going to free associate. I'm be like, okay, so if I make this decision, it looks like this, and then this thing could happen, and then this would happen, and then, okay, that feels really tough. What if I make this decision at that point and go down this? Ooh, no, and then you end up like, oh, that's terrible. I should not do that, right? And then I'll
yeah,
take myself to the other decision, right? Be like, oh yeah, that feels good. Okay, I'm following this step. I'm going down this. Ooh, I bumped against this thing. That's not really what I wanted. And let me back up. Let's see if I can go back 3 decisions and figure something. Oh, there it is. That's how I go this way, right? And so you're really mapping it out through the energetics. And so when we develop these, or when we allow ourselves to work with these abilities, right? And bring that level of awareness that it takes to just be there with them, not only, communicating with our loved ones is cool. That can bring a lot of healing to people that have recently lost someone. Communicating with our spirit guides, I feel like that's just more of like an adventure of like fun. But the way that we can really use these abilities in a practical way is to live an amazing life. Because when you're looking into the energetics of your life, when you're looking into the energetics of your decisions, you're going to make so much better decisions in your life. And by default, it's going to increase your quality of life, and it's going to allow you to have a pretty cool, amazing life. But we got to allow ourselves into that energy, into that, be there with it. Because I feel like a lot of people get frustrated, right? They're like, oh, my intuition, I felt it do this, but oh, there was this decision, right? I'm emotionally invested over here. So now I'm going to rationalize against my own intuition. And they end up going with this. And they're like, oh, I should have trusted my intuition. Well, yeah,
Right.
maybe not on the spot. Maybe you shouldn't have blindly trusted your intuition, but maybe you should have just dove into it a little deeper,
Mhm.
on each end. And I think that that's what we're really missing, in a lot of these spiritual teachings.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I think we do get stuck in analysis paralysis sometimes, and there's also ego that gets involved. I have a really big ego, like I from the beginning, and I think this is with anyone who struggled in their childhood. They kind of create this sort of identity that you have to look a certain way or do certain things in order to have what you want, which obviously we know that's not true. But I think that's kind of like the reason why a lot of people struggle is ego. But you did mention something about. Oh no, actually, my question is, what do you think is the reason why a lot of people can't or struggle with connecting with their seven senses, connecting with opening up and being more aware?
Bad information. Bad
Mm.
information. Blindly believing, blindly adopting the truth of others as their own personal truth.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that boils down to bad information. And that's the number one thing. If you're, there's a lot of people out there with really big followings. Many of them been on TV shows. Many of them have written lots of books. Many of them have expensive mentorship courses. And I've been to several of them. And what I can tell you is that the stuff they share may work for them. Okay. And it may bring them through, and it may work for them, but it's not, like I said, it's not this cut and dry, one size fits all solution. And that's what I find, that people defer their sense making to these authority figures. And that's what holds people back, is because it might be bad information for that individual, right? That they're following, that they've deferred, that they've said that they've given all of their authority to, and said, this person is right. And if I can't do it the way that they say, I'm doing something wrong, or I can't do it. Okay. I think that's kind of what holds people back.
Absolutely. So, what would you say someone should do to get started? I know you basically said become more aware, start kind of focusing on your dominant sense. But let's say they don't know what their dominant sense is. They know that something's going on, but they haven't actually identified that yet.
So the number one thing that you have to that you should everybody should start off doing, I think that this works wonders for everybody, is just sit there focusing on your body, focusing on the outside, the inside, hold your awareness on the body, and just feel the little things that are happening in it, right? The tingles, the places that hurt, the places that feel good, the places that are tight, the places, the sensations that are coming up. Do you feel waves of emotion moving up? Is your head tingling? Can you feel the wind blowing against your skin? All of those things, just focusing on your body, because those sensations that we're experiencing, that's us. That's us. That's our energy we're experiencing in our own body. And our body's like a tuning fork. It is vibrating to our own energy, and it is creating these sensations as we're sitting still in a room. And so I'm not saying to meditate, stay aware, stay super aware, do the opposite of meditation, hyper focus on your body and notice every single thing that's happening in an energetic state, in an aroused state, just like I'm talking, right? You don't have to get into that move, that woo woo state, and I think that if people can just do that, they'll learn so much about themselves, right? Because the next step from there, I think, to really help people get a bigger picture and really bring in an awareness, is to expand, right? Because we're more than this energy in the body. It's just a portion of our energy. The rest, we are these omnipresent beings. We exist everywhere. And again, everybody out there that's watching this, don't take my word for this. Do it and figure it out on your own, or experience it for yourself. If you follow your energy outside of your body, you bring your awareness with you. Okay. And when you bring your awareness outside of your body, you really see things in a totally different way. You see how big you are. You see how amazing things are. You see this world as a pebble in comparison to everything else that is in existence, the infinity of existence. And it takes that projection of the awareness to really understand who we are on an energetic level. And I believe that once you experience that, it's all downhill from there. You've got it. It's just keeping that momentum, you know. And it's really easy to do. It's really easy to do, you know, if we can detach from some of the things that are out there. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I believe that as well. I think that really the ultimate goal is to expand, and that'll help you love life more and just appreciate being here in this lifetime in the body that you decided to be in. But I'm really curious about what you think about reincarnation, life after death, if you believe that at all. What's your point of view?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I went through a 4-year regression program. I've seen so many past lives, with people. It's undeniable. I've been regressed close to 30 times myself, so I've been, not just here on Earth, but, Earth is new. you know,
Right.
we've been on other planets as well. And so, there's certainly for me, it's concrete evidence that reincarnation exists, and life after death. And I'm totally there on that. And you know when it comes to that, one of the questions that I get asked a lot in my work is that, okay, if my loved one's reincarnated, how can I still communicate with them? Or can I communicate with them? And yes, you can. And the reason behind that is because, like I said earlier, we are these omnipresent energy beings. We exist everywhere. We exist in every dimension, every plane of existence, all that ever is, all that ever was, all that will ever be. That's who we are. And um, when we incarnate into the physical body, it's just a piece of our energy. It's just a part of our energy. It's almost insignificant compared to who we are, right? On an energetic level. And so when we come into the physical body at birth, or, through pregnancy, the chakra system gets organized in pregnancy, and we start to kind of like dip our toe in and out, until usually about 6 months old, where we're fully present in the body. But when that happens, we bring our awareness here to this dimension. Okay. And we start to shape this ego. We start to identify based on our life experience. We start to have this experience through life. And so we're creating a personality. We're creating this identity, right? That's maybe different to who we are on a soul level. And so we go through life, we live with other people, and then we pass and we leave our loved ones on. Well, when we pass, that personality and all of those memories from that life are retained in that larger part of you. And then there's another part that goes and dips its toe into a new body, reincarnates, but all of those memories and personalities are still there. And as a matter of fact, they're shaping who we are on that soul level, each incarnation. So when we connect with a loved one, even if they've reincarnated into a new life, those personalities and memories are held in their energy. And when we channel them, or when we connect with them, we're connecting with that part of the energy. Yeah. And so that's how
Wow.
it's possible.
There's so two questions that came up for me when you were talking about that, especially most recently. I've met two people actually, that mirror what is happening in my life with theirs, and it's I'm very energetically connected to them, and there's no relation. We live in completely different states, completely different countries, and I'm kind of wondering if there's a possibility that we can reincarnate at the same time, and sort of our energy gets fractaled into someone else, and we're kind of just living this life mirroring each other. And also, does that connect with twin flames and soulmates? Those two terms? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So it all comes down to, what's the soul? Who we are. We are the soul, right? I use soul and spirit energy, all of that interchangeably, right? And
Yeah.
so on a soul level, on the ultimate level of who we are, not just talking about this body, but on the grand scheme of who we are, the larger part of us, we come here to evolve on a soul level. And so if we're going to fractal our energy, what's the evolutionary intent there? What is the purpose of that? I have not experienced that. I have not experienced any kind of like another me somewhere else, or another someone, even somewhere, someone else somewhere else that is here existing on this planet at the same time. And to me it kind of makes sense. Like, so what would be the evolutionary intent to have two different experiences at the same time, to hurry evolution? Like, when there's no time in the spirit world, why would we need to rush things? My experience tells me that everything about this journey is about savoring it and enjoying it. It's about the journey. It's not rushing to a destination. And so what would be the evolutionary intent of fractal energy, right? And so I look at it from that perspective. I don't think that there's anything going on there.
Mm.
But as far as like what you're saying, like, can we reincarnate at the same time with from our past loved ones, or can we even skip lifetimes and reincarnate with somebody who was in our life 3 or 4 lifetimes ago and incarnate in the same life? And I believe absolutely, because when we look at the, from a logical level, right, from an energetic level, I've experienced this. I've worked with thousands of people, done hundreds of regressions, right, when I was doing regression therapy, and I've seen it time and time again. We reincarnate with the same people because there's unfinished business, right? Not necessarily karma or karmic relationships. We could certainly ascribe some of that stuff, some of that language, but let's just call it what it is. It's unfinished business. There's some sort of energetic tie, something that you've obsessed over, something that you have a compulsion over, that has caused your energies to need to break that tie. And until you break that tie, you're going to pull each other into your lives. Okay. And so that's completing that compulsion. That's completing, right? For instance, like, let's give an example. Let's say a father, there's a house on fire, the family's in the house, and the father runs into the house to save the family, but nobody makes it out. They all burn in the fire. Okay, what is the man thinking, right? And actually, this is a case study that I did for my regression therapy. What would be the man thinking? Well, in this scenario, in this study that I did, this person I worked with, the man was going, I got to save my family. I got to save my family. I got to save my family. And he ended up, a beam fell on him, died, and everybody died. And, the spirit wandered around looking at everyone's dead, burnt up bodies. And so it was kind of like stuck there. That fragment of energy was kind of stuck walking around in that scene. Okay. And so that's the type of compulsion. And so what ended up happening is, in this life that I was working with the client, they had this irrational, crippling belief that created so much anxiety that anytime a family member left, they thought they were going to die and they were never going to see him again, right? And this particular was a woman. She was, in her late 40s, and she just couldn't let go, right? She had kids, she had kids a kid getting ready to go into college, a husband, younger kids, and she just could not let go. There was this compulsion. And so, that type of energy, right? When we went into it, we learned that she had incarnated with her entire family again, but they were playing in these different roles, right? We actually started to discover that the child going off to college was actually the wife in that scenario, in that past life. And so there were these different roles. And so what we ended up needing to do was discharge that event, right? Discharge what happened, that compulsion, right? Kept those energies stuck together, kept them. They needed that husband in that past life needed to save those children. He couldn't move on until he did. And so when we worked with it, we discharged the stuff from that life. There's like a whole other story behind it, but this, for time's sake, we discharged that compulsion, that need to go save them, that unfinished business. We discharged it in that past life, and it fixed the symptoms in this life. It kind of let things, she was more accepting. She was, felt good when they left, and, all of that irrational fear had subsided. So when we experience stuff like that in past lives, it most certainly can bring these energetic ties, this unfinished business to finish in these other lives.
I 100% agree with that. And I want to just share something personal that I recently did. So, the last couple years, I've been feeling this intense anxiety to leave my relationship. And it's a 13-year relationship, by the way, with someone I love very deeply. And in that anxiety, and on top of that, my mom's voice, who passed away 3 years ago, in my right ear, just telling me, you know, Tanisha, it's time to leave. It's time to leave. Blah blah blah. So I'm feeling this anxiety, and I'm asking myself, okay, one, could I do what I'm doing right now for another 10 years? And it was immediate no, gut feeling and everything. And two, if this is a lesson that needs to be learned from my past life, let's say maybe I was in a relationship in a past life and I decided to stay, and it became this sort of like stain on my spirit because I was staying out of fear, regardless of where the fear was coming from. It was just purely fear, right? So I knew, I would say about a week ago, I was like, okay, I don't want to relive a life where I'm too afraid to do something, even if that decision is scary as hell. So I'm just kind of curious about what you think when it comes to something similar to that, where it's not, a death, it's not a major life happening. I guess technically this is a major life happening, but it's something that we're being called to do to continue the cycle or to complete the cycle of our purpose on earth in a way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what what I believe you're saying here. You mentioned there's this stain on your spirit, and another way that we could say that is that in the way that I experience it is that there's this energy that's held in in the soul, in the spirit. There's this energy of, like you said, staying in a bad situation that you're carrying with you, right? And so a lot of people might call that karma, like, oh well, now I'm in another bad relationship, it's my karma, I got to heal my karma. And I must have done something bad in my past life, and where there may be an element of that, but that's so small and such a misunderstanding of karma. Karma is the energy that we emanate, the energy that's the totality of who we are. And so if you have that unresolved, or you have that energy where, oh, I should have left, like you felt that, right? That imprints in your energy field, and you will carry that forward until you break out of that, until you discharge that imprint. And that could be what's occurring here. That could be certainly what's occurring here, is that it's, in a past life something happened, and now it's about you standing up for yourself. I think it sounds like you've leaned pretty hard into it, and you've come up with an action plan.
Oh, absolutely. I did it. And I'm like extremely proud of myself, extremely proud. Like, I know that this is going to open up a new, I don't know, like you said, a new energetic cycle for me in a way. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but
And it will.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people, going back to what you were talking about, twin flames. I don't personally believe in any kind of twin flame story or theory or relationship, but I do believe that. Oh, can you see? Do I need to leave again? Hello. All right. Let me leave again.
There we are.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, you were saying that you don't believe in twin flames or anything like that.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily believe in the whole twin flame journey as the story gets told traditionally. Um, I just think that that people are just telling the story of toxic relationships, is really what I believe the twin flame story is, in the twin flame journey. That being said, I don't think that there's anything out there that creates personal growth more than our personal relationships, for the people that are willing to look at their own shit. That's the disclaimer. You have to be willing to look at your own thing. I've never come across a situation where people are sitting on a cloud and we're like, when we get down there, I want you to cheat on me. I want you to stab me in the back. I want you to gossip about me because I want to learn love and forgiveness, you know? And then they're going to figure out all this. And when we get down there, we're going to meet and we're just going to, I'd never run into that situation. But what I have seen are people with different attachment styles that are drawn to each other because of the way that they relate and the way that they were brought up to relate love. And in that dynamic, it creates a lot of friction, it creates a lot of toxicity. And if we don't have at least one person willing to look at their own shit and the reason why that the relationship has turned that way, then they'll eventually split, right? Or they'll stay in the toxic dynamic their entire life, right? But if they, and they'll just attribute it to the other person, right? But when we look at our own stuff and to see where we're participating, or we can see like why, or even on the subtle level, the entry level, why am I putting up with this? Why is this okay? Why am I staying with this person if this is the way things are? We'll start to uncover things. We'll start to become more self-aware. And that's how we can grow. That's how we can get out of these cycles so we're not going into these twin flame relationships. We start our own healing journey and we resolve these unhealthy attachment styles that we've learned through life by the type of relationships that were modeled to us. And when we get into it, and the more we break free of those chains and heal that previous trauma and start to really bring more of a self-awareness to how our past is playing out in our present and in an unhealthy way, the more awareness we can bring to that and choose something different when we notice it coming up. And you will start to find relationships where other people are doing the same. And now we're talking about breaking cycles, breaking generational curses, breaking generational trauma when we start to do that stuff. So, is that the twin flame journey? Okay, if it's defined in that way, I go, I would say that's what the way that I see relationships and how they play out and how a bad relationship can end up turning into something beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when you're vibrating at a certain frequency too, you're just going to attract that naturally. So, bringing up karma again, really quick. The way, and this is kind of going off of what you just said, I think that it makes sense because we have so many different timelines where there's different versions of us that are happening all at once. So why would this particular lifetime be the end all be all, of every decision that you make being super important that's going to keep you from incarnating and controlling all these different aspects of your life if there's a million different versions of you that are probably not doing the same thing? So I don't know, it's just something to kind of consider. But let's see, there is one more thing that I wanted to mention, and I think, and of course I forgot. Let's see, I think it was, oh yes, contacting spirits and things like that. So I know that's one of the major things you talk about on your TikTok. What would you say what would you say the best method would be if you wanted to contact spirits? Like if you really wanted to reach out to a loved one who's passed away, maybe you don't remember your dreams, maybe you don't have a strong clairvoyance, like you don't see in your mind's eye very well. What's some things that people can consider to do that?
So reach out to them directly without any of the pendulums, the spirit rods, the Ouija board. I would say out of everything, the Ouija board is probably the most reliable thing because you're working with a couple different people and their energy, and it seems to be a little bit more authentic. But I would say the best way to connect with your loved ones is just to sit back, focus on your body, feel those sensations like I was talking about, and then just start to think about them. And when you start to think about them, it brings your awareness closer to theirs, right? Remember, we're much larger than this body. There's a portion of our energy that's in spirit world with them right now. And when we start to think about them, we're projecting our awareness there. And if you can just feel those sensations in your body, that's really the first thing. Think about your loved one, you'll go there immediately. It'll happen right away. And you'll notice those feelings in your body start to change. That's you. That's the energies. That's your energy interacting with their energy. Right. And from there, just sit there and feel.
I think that another thing to mention is just making sure that you're thinking of them at a high vibration, like you're thinking positive thoughts. You know, I think those negative thoughts can also be a block in a way, and you could be kind of putting up a wall without even realizing it when it comes to like trying to connect with those loved ones. So, what do you think is the purpose of loved ones coming back and trying to reach out to you? Do you think it's they become soul guides? I'm sorry, not soul guides, spirit guides in a way. Do you think they're here to help us on our journey? What is the purpose of them maybe not choosing not to reincarnate and to be with us?
So I've never run into a situation where somebody's loved one ended up being their spirit guide. And um, now that doesn't mean that we can't talk to them for perspective, talk to them, and if there's somebody, like, for instance, I worked with a woman who lost her husband a while ago, where she he's the one who did everything around the house. He's the one who made the decisions. They had a business together. They made business decisions. He's the one who contacted the lawn company, took care of the pool stuff, knew exactly what the schedule was on everything, and it was all in his head. He didn't have anything that she could follow. And so, that was her reason for reconnecting with him, was to get the particulars. And we went in, and she was getting, within a couple of, within 2, 3 days, she was going in there, getting login passwords, getting usernames. She was, getting his advice on decisions to make in the business, how to wrap things up, wind things down, because that's ultimately what he had communicated to her. Just wind things down, sweetie. You have more than enough. You don't have to do anything. Enjoy your life. That was his message, right? You can do this if you want. The decision is yours, right? And so I think that that's the reason. That's one of the reasons why. The other reason that I have seen that I've worked with people for connecting with their loved ones is just to help heal that grief, right? When you can go to a medium, or you can go to somebody that brings that through, and believe me, I've seen a lot of healing occur with that, by going and getting a reading, because it does when you go to a good medium, you're going to get evidence beyond a shadow of doubt. You are going to know that your loved one exists beyond this, and that in itself can be very healing. But when you have the experience yourself, and you're the one communicating, you're the one seeing them, you're the one, they are right there, it takes the healing to a whole nother level. And I think that that's probably one of the main reasons why people want to connect with their loved ones.
Wow. You mentioned Ouija board, and I know most people would say absolutely do not touch a Ouija board or anything similar to it because you could be opening up something negative and, they attach themselves to you, blah, blah, blah. So, do you think that the entertainment industry has kind of warped I don't know, the definition of spiritual tools? Not definition, but using spiritual tools. And why do you think the Ouija board is the most powerful one?
Well, when it comes to the Ouija board specifically, right? And you can take
Right.
some of this on some of the other things. I think that there's a lot of religions that spoke out against that, right? That really hammered it. And there's a lot of people out there, I can't tell you how many messages, or even when I connect with people, they tell me, they're like, oh, so and so saw this dark figure, and then she had a heart attack the next day. It had to have been because of that. Like, well, why? Why did that have to happen, right? And I think a lot of people do the same thing with the Ouija board. Like, oh, this terrible thing happened the next day after I used it. It had to be that. I got in a car accident. It had to be that. And I think that people offload a lot of stuff onto it. I can tell you, here's the thing, like, here's the way that I like to break it down for people that may be a little bit nervous about using a Ouija board, because I think it's the most effective form of spirit communication when you use it with more than one person. If you're using it by yourself, it's the same thing as pendulum and everything else. But when you use it with more than one person, your energies have to be in sync in order for that thing to move. Okay. And so here's what we have to think about. let's say we're using the Ouija board to connect with Aunt Joe, right? Or Aunt Joanne. And um, if there are bad spirits that are going to come through, what we are really saying is that there is some realm of demonic entities that are just observing all of the earth, looking for somebody to just start, open up a Ouija board. And as soon as that happens, they come down there and they get them, right? It just sounds ridiculous. It just is. It's certainly not something that's happening. There is no portal to open because we're surrounded by spirits right now all of the time. We are always around spirits, and anyone that's willing to take the dive and really explore that will see that for themselves, right? I'm really not here to preach about it or convince anyone, because I do. Anytime I do videos on that, like I lose thousands of followers whenever I do anything on Ouija boards. And like the last video I did, I posted a video of my kids playing with it. They have it in their room, they pull it out whenever they want, right? I don't even know they're playing with it, and they're up there doing it. 4 and 9-year-old, right? And it's fine. You know, they'll come down. The 4-year-old will come down and be like, "Hey, Dad, who's Ruth?" I'm like, "Oh, that's your great grandma." You know, and so it's you know, they have their own experiences with it, and you know, nothing. I've been using them since I was 8 years old, right, and before I even believed in any of this, right, and it did freak me out. I'm like, this thing is moving and it's giving us stuff, right? And it did. It freaked me out. You know, I'd used it a few times, but then after, you know, I had my awakening, I was still afraid to use a Ouija board. And then after I started having the experiences and going and seeing what spirit world is really about, what are the, you know, the other entities that exist in this world and, you know, in the energetic realms, it really, people have a fear of the unknown. But once you know the unknown, there's nothing to be afraid of, you know? I think that that's what that's why there's so much negative connotations around the Ouija board, is because it's just been passed down, right? It's just been passed down for as long as they've been in existence, that it's evil.
That's the truth. Yeah, that's kind of how like a lot of things are defined in history by usually by the church. You know, that's kind of like the usually where a lot of the negative I don't know opinions have come when it comes to spirituality in general. Um,
Yeah,
what were we gonna say?
yeah, I was going to say absolutely. So if you really think about it, you know, how many hundreds or even thousands of years has, you know, Judeo-Christianity and, you know, other organized religions been telling us that, you know, if you communicate with spirits, or if you don't believe in God, or if you go against God's words, demons are going to come get you and drag you to hell, right? That's in our DNA. That's part of our DNA. So of course there's this natural fear. Everyone has it. You know, I was in Catholic school till 5th grade. I certainly understand the fear. You know, I certainly understand why people experience that. But that's also what gets me a little riled up, is that okay, you know, I had that experience because I was indoctrinated, right? And because I wasn't willing to look at anything else because of my fear. And when I came into my spiritual awakening, I started having these experiences with the spirit world, and I started to experience scary spirits. I faced them, right? I started to face them even though I was afraid. And what I realized was like, man, y'all are just more afraid of me than I am of you. That's what I'm feeling, is your fear, you know? And so it's just, once we really face those fears is when we can see that there's, um, you know, nothing to fear. I can go, you know, the first time someone goes skydiving, I'm sure is going to be a lot different than the thousandth time they go, you know?
Yeah, mic drop. No, that's awesome. I love that. I think we'll end it there. I think that I just want to say thank you again for joining me today and taking time out of your day and, you know, just talking about this stuff that you probably talked about a million times. Is there anything that you want to mention, anything that you want to bring up to our listeners, any events that are coming up?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to keep in touch with what I'm doing and what I'm up to, you can follow me on all social medias. I'm out there on all of them. You can just follow me on those, and if you want to get on my mailing list, you can. I have a free spirit communication guide that has a few steps and frameworks for you to, to kind of walk through, to kind of give you some, people a little bit of guidance that have never done anything like this. And if you download that, you get on my mailing list, and we'll keep in touch. But there's one thing that I want to leave with people, and close this. And I just want to say that the thing that I wish I would have known in the beginning of my journey, and what I really, really have taken away from years of walking on this path, and still hold very closely to me, is that be careful with what you believe out there. Be careful of who you trust blindly, right? Um, the number one piece of advice that I want to leave is this: don't just blindly follow somebody. Don't just blindly incorporate their beliefs because you read it in a book, because they have millions of followers, because they've been on TV shows, because they've written books. Don't blindly adopt. If it resonates with you, it still doesn't even mean it's your final truth. It just means that you need to experiment and play with it. If you can experiment and play with that information and recreate the experience that that information is talking about, then you know it's valid. You have validated it through personal experience. If you cannot, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just simply bad information. Move on to the next thing that resonates. Experiment, play. Don't blindly believe. Personal experience. I have no room in my being for faith. Validate through personal experience.
I love that.